Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's IEEE USA webinar, Investing 101, a field guide to knowing how, when, and where to invest. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. Our presenter for today is Senior Wealth Advisor and IEEE member David Sandhu, who returns to us with another great financial literacy-focused webinar. David formerly worked for SpaceX, Raytheon, and Lockheed Martin as an engineer before he transitioned to the financial services industry. After his father passed away, David helped his mom through the financial planning process, and that gave him the spark to pursue a career in financial planning. David is passionate about serving others and lives by Zig Ziglar's famous saying, "You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want." He knows firsthand that true happiness is experienced when helping others and is always looking for ways to encourage others to reach their goals. David is a chartered retirement planning counselor and financial advisor. He has a passion for education and understands that the key to successful retirement planning begins with wisdom. Without further ado, I will now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome back, David. We're very excited for what you have in store for our audience today.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jonathan, and special thanks to IEEE for the opportunity. Again, I think this is maybe our fourth or fifth time to come back, so I really appreciate the opportunity. Shout out to my local IEEE chapter here in Fort Worth. And again, thanks to IEEE USA for the opportunity to present. So I would love to know just maybe as we're getting started and getting kicked off, I know people are still logging in, but just to give people another few seconds here, I'd love to know maybe what company you work for and maybe what part of the country you're calling in from. So wherever you are in the world, maybe just type in the chat box, maybe what company you work for and what part of the country you're calling in from. Would love to know. And I think maybe the chat box, I think people can see the chat. Is that right, Jonathan? So maybe we can, everybody else can see where people are calling in from. My name is David Sandhu, as Jonathan mentioned. I'm a senior financial advisor here at Eversource Wealth Advisors. The workshop today is called Investing 101, a field guide to knowing how, when, and where to invest. And just before we get started, I want to jump into a quick disclosure, of course. Anything we discuss is not meant to be taken as specific tax, financial, or legal advice. Everything we discuss is meant to be general information and educational in nature. So with that in the background, actually, Jonathan, I'm not sure if you can enable my chat. I'm not sure why, but I can't see if people are commenting in. But if not, no worries. Okay, so how do we, when we think about investing, everybody has different questions. Everybody has different ideas about what investing is. I think from an early age, right, we all have our own investing story. And so, and then of course, there's certainly things in the news that people see, or there's maybe something on social media that people will read about. And so the idea behind today's workshop is really just to break down what investing is, right, from an asset allocation perspective, from an asset location perspective, and really just have a field guide to knowing how, when, and where to invest. And so let me go to my next slide here. Yeah, so who is this class for? It's for professionals that want education on how to understand the phase of investing you're in, how to invest according to the phase, to your phase of retirement, how to take full advantages that you have from the tax benefit side as an employee potentially, how to know which type of account is best for you, right? So people get, people ask me questions all the time. Should I go into an IRA or Roth or a 401k or a 457, right? There's all different types of accounts out there. And then really just develop the peace of mind that comes from having an investing plan. And so if that sounds like you, then you are in the right place. And so for those of you that don't know me, my name is David Sandhu. I'm a former electrical engineer. I worked at Raytheon, at SpaceX, at Lockheed Martin, a number of aerospace and defense companies. I really appreciated the culture that I got to experience in aerospace and defense. These are, when I was at Lockheed, I worked in Skunk Works, but these are a couple of pictures of me here volunteering at Habitat for Humanity, the Dallas Stars program, Engineers in the Classroom. Really appreciated that as well. So, and actually the bottom picture is a picture of my wife and I. My wife actually worked on F-35 when I was working in Skunk Works. So that's a little bit about who I am. I also created the Financial Freedom Blueprint, and that allowed my wife and I to pay off about $100,000 of college student loan debt, to save up an emergency fund of 1 year, to give over $150,000 in charitable donations, and then to pay off the mortgage on our home. And I have the wonderful privilege of teaching, families just like you how to accomplish similar types of goals fast. And so you might be wondering, David, why did you leave a career in rocket science and engineering to pursue a career in financial planning. And my story really starts with my father. So this is a picture of my father and I. And about 15 years ago, I took my parents on a cruise. By the way, that cruise, the IEEE cruise, looks amazing. The promo video is awesome. But as you can see, the cruise ship here in the background, I took my parents on a cruise about 15 years ago. And I asked my dad, I said, hey, Dad, do you have any investment or retirement accounts? And he started laughing and he said, yeah, David, I've got 5 investment accounts that I've been putting money into over the years. Well, if for those of you that have been to any of my workshops, you know my story, and that my dad didn't have any investment accounts, but because I'm one of 5 kids. And so he wasn't putting any money into investment accounts or IRAs or anything like that. He was really putting money into us, right? He would have called us his greatest investments. Unfortunately, my father never got to experience the return on that investment. Unfortunately, about 10 years ago, my father passed away. And going through that experience, I was actually working at Raytheon at the time. I was working in Guam. I came back to the States, and I really just started helping my mom with her own tough financial planning questions. And some of those questions you might have too as well on today's workshop. But I've kind of always been the money nerd of my family. And so I just started walking my mom through her own financial planning questions around, Social Security and planning for retirement and getting a budget together, just some basic things and maybe some more advanced things for some people. But really just wanted to help her and be available, be there for her. And so I walked her through some of those tough financial planning questions, and going through that experience with her is really what put the spark in me to start helping other people with their finances. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up working at SpaceX for a couple of years and at Lockheed Martin. And ended up, while I was working full time, I just started volunteering. I just wanted to volunteer my time to help other people, just like I'm doing right now, just to help people in the community. Obviously, you're spread out throughout the country, but help people in my community just learn more about personal finance and get more information on financial literacy. I really saw the power, the positive and the devastating power that personal finance, or the lack of knowledge thereof, not get that data, not get that information that they need, and kind of the bad effects that it can have on families. And so really my purpose for today is really just to talk about Investing 101, a field guide to knowing how, when, and where to invest. And so like Jonathan mentioned, I former electrical engineer, and then transitioned over to becoming a financial advisor several years ago. And so let's get right into the agenda for today. So we've got about 50 minutes left here. And if you have questions as we go through the workshop, feel free to drop them in the chat box. I would love to get some engagement here. I see the chat box, so thanks for everybody for typing in there. The agenda for today is we're going to talk about the 3 phases of investing, the purpose of investing. We'll talk about asset allocation, asset location, and then asset relocation. And then we'll talk about investment accounts, the type of investment products, understanding your risk tolerance score, and then some common mistakes to avoid. So again, as we go through the workshop today, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat box. I definitely want this to be engaging, and I'll certainly ask questions of you as well. This is a nice chart here from JP Morgan Chase. They have a lot of nice graphics here, and I like this framework here, because what we're going to be talking about today, some people will just say, well, we really can't control the stock market, so why should I try to understand it? And the idea behind the investing equation here is there are things that are out of our control, right? Like market returns. I can't control that. Nobody can control that. And then there's things that are out of our control, like tax and benefits policy or regulations coming out of Washington. We don't have any control over that. Then we have some control over things like our employment or our earnings and duration, how long we work, our employment, right? There's some control there. So we have some control over longevity, right? We have control over how we eat and how we exercise. So there is a little bit of control there, but then there's also things out of our control from a health perspective, right? Like our genes and our parents, right? And so those 2 areas of control, we maybe don't have as much control. But then in total control here, as you can see, saving and spending. So how much of our income are we going to save versus how much are we going to spend? We can decide that. And then also the other thing that we can decide is asset allocation and asset location, which thankfully that's all we're talking about today. We're talking about Investing 101. And so the things that we're going to be talking about today are things that are in your control. So the purpose of this workshop is not for you to leave and think, oh man, there's nothing I can do here with this information. The purpose of this is to really look at your finances and look at your investing and say, what are the things, what is that? I'm a big fan of the Pareto principle. So what's that 20% of action that will move me 80% closer to my goal? So that's why I like this investing equation from JP Morgan. So let's talk about the 3 phases of investing. In general, when I meet with clients, right, they're either in one of these 3 phases, either in the accumulation phase. So those are people that are more focused on growing their investments. Then there's people in the preservation phase. Those are people that are more focused on preserving their capital. And then there's people in the distribution phase. Those are people that are already retired. And I see a couple of people that said, hey, I'm already retired. I live, Solomon retired in Chandler, Arizona. I saw another one recently retired from an aerospace company in Ohio. Very cool. And then there's the distribution phase. So those people are just focused on, again, generating income in retirement. So those are the three phases of investing. Let me ask you a question before we go to the next slide here. What phase of investing are you in? Are you in the accumulation phase of investing? So you're just really focused on growth? Are you in, and you can just type in A if that sounds like you. If you're in the preservation phase of investing, you can just type in P into the chat box. Wherever you are on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, you can just type in P into the chat box. And then if you're in the distribution phase of investing, you can just type in D into the chat box. And again, people in the distribution phase of investing, they're already retired. They're really, really just focused on income. So again, if you're in the accumulation phase, type in A. If you're in the preservation phase, type in P. If you're in the distribution phase, type in D here. So Daryl, hey, good to see you, Daryl. Daryl's in the accumulation phase. Jim is preservation. Rich is accumulation, maybe preservation. Yeah, so there's some people that are kind of shifting their mindset here. There is a little bit of a paradigm shift. I equate it sometimes to climbing a mountain, right? The wonderful opportunity to climb a mountain is not just to get to the top of a mountain. Successfully climbing a mountain also means you get back down the mountain. So it's not just about accumulation. You have to be able to preserve where you've gotten and then also come down the mountain. Manuel says accumulation. Wayne is distribution. Salman is preservation. Yeah, so we have a smattering of people kind of all throughout the board. Rogelio is accumulation. So yeah, there's people throughout this workshop that are scattered throughout accumulation, preservation, and then there's some people that are kind of in the middle. They're shifting from an accumulation to a preservation phase, or from a preservation to a distribution phase. Yeah, Sean is shifting from accumulation to preservation. Stephen is C. I'm not sure if maybe that's the critical phase, the critical phase of investing there. So let's go through the benefits. Now, again, this is for people obviously focused on the accumulation phase. But I love the way this chart outlays it. And I don't know if Jonathan, if you can blow this up so people can see it a little bit clearer, but thank you. The benefit of saving early. I love this graphic because it's so powerful when you think about starting early. Okay, so there's a couple of different investors here. The one in the green, they're a consistent saver. So they save from 25 to age 65. Okay, they save for basically 40 years. Consistent saver, just saving the same amount for their entire life. Then you have someone who saved, and that was at, that's roughly, I think, like 3%. Then you have someone who's consistently saving I think they're getting like 7%. That's the blue line. That's this top line. Okay. Then you have someone, now this is where it gets interesting. If you see this dotted line, this is an early saver and investor. And here's where the differences really come in. So the dotted line here, early saver and investor, they saved from age 25 to 35 and then stopped. And then they just let their compounding, continue to do compounding's work. Okay. But here's where it gets a little weird. If you look at the purple line, so this is, I didn't save anything until I hit 35. And then I saved for the next 30 years. So from 35 to 65, that the purple line never catches up to that dotted line. So the power of compounding is this person who saved for 10 years for those first 10 years and then never invested anything else, never saved anything else, but just kept it invested. That person would have outpaced the person that saved and invested for an additional 30 years. So the power of starting early, I can't stress the power of starting early enough. And that's why I love this slide, is because it so clearly indicates the power of starting early. The other one, and this is a little bit more nuanced, this is the benefit of auto escalation. So if you look at account growth from contributions and employer matches and investment returns, you can see the differences between a consistent 10% contribution versus someone who's escalating their 401k contribution, as an example, by 1%. So in this example here, right, someone starts with $0 at 25. So three people start with basically 25, and they invest all the way till they're 65. And one person basically just does a standard 3% contribution. One person escalates it 1% per year until capping at the 10%, and then one person consistently hits that 10% number. So I like this a little bit because you can kind of see the difference between, hey, should I front load it? Should I save over time? And I'm a big fan of dollar cost averaging. So and I think this resonates with a lot of people as well because it comes out of your paycheck. So the three phases of investing, let's go back to the three phases of investing. Accumulation phase, and if you missed that, I know a couple of people just typed in the chat box where they are, but if you missed it, you feel free to type in A if you're in the accumulation phase. This is for people that are more than 10 years out from retirement. The P, or preservation phase, that's for people within 10 years of retirement. And then D, for distribution, that's for people that are in retirement. And I really believe that 10 years prior to retirement up until the first 5 years after retirement, those are the critical years. That's the time when you really cannot afford to make a mistake with your investments there. So we've talked about the three phases of investing, and let me tell you, the biggest way to understand which phase of investing you're in is, and a good example is, we just experienced some market volatility here with the tariffs, kind of coming out and then having the pause. And for people that are in the accumulation phase, and so if I'm 20 years old and the market goes up 20% or down 20%, it doesn't really affect me necessarily because I'm not even going to touch this money for another maybe 30 or 40 years. Versus someone who's maybe 65, who's about to start touching this money, an upward swing of 20% or downward swing of 20% can really impact the sequence of returns that you get in your portfolio, because that will have a meaningful impact on your retirement income. Which ties into the purpose of investing. So what is the purpose of investing? Well, typically what I see here is people in the accumulation phase, that they are really focused on compounding growth, right? So they're focused on, and whatever that means, it might be education, it might be for medical issues, for later on in life, it might be to give to charity, it might be for a gift, it might be for a wedding, for a home, vacation, right? There's a number of reasons that people save besides just retirement if you're in the accumulation phase. But then as we start shifting into the preservation phase, this is when we start seeing people wanting to preserve the money. So you'll see the purpose here shifts towards principal protection, preservation, maybe paying off debts like a mortgage or an auto loan, or maybe it's for a new vehicle. Maybe they're trying to transition into retirement with no debt, meaning no mortgage, no loans from a car. So they want to have that, kind of their last car that they're going to buy. And then as we look at the purpose of investing in the distribution phase, now this is not all cut and dry, right? There's room here to wiggle, but from the distribution perspective, that's when I start seeing more people focus on strategic tax planning, focus on, hey, inflation. I paid 50 cents for a bottle of Coke, 20 years ago, and now it's $1.50, or now it's $2. And so what's it going to be in 20 or 30 years? So inflation is definitely a real thing that we see eat away at people's retirement, but inflation becomes an issue. Medical care, long-term care, estate and legacy planning, charitable giving, risk management, whatever that is, whatever your purpose of investing is, maybe just type it in the chat box if you feel comfortable. What's your purpose of investing? Are you just saving for retirement? Are you saving for a rainy day? Are you saving for a wedding, for a house, for medical care? Are you saving for whatever that is? You can feel free to type it in the chat box if you want to share with the world here what you're saving for. So now we've talked about the three phases of investing, and then we've talked about the purpose of investing. And if you have clarity on those two things, it becomes a lot easier to determine it becomes a lot easier to determine what your asset allocation will be. Because if you don't have a clear understanding of where you are, right? And the way I think about investing is, if you ever go into a hotel and you look on the back of the door, I think they still have these. If you look on the back of the door, it'll say, hey, here's your fire exit, escape route, right? If there's a fire, you need to follow this map. And I've been to some hotels where they don't show you one critical piece of information, right? They show you where the exits are, but what they don't show you is where you are. And that's the important part. I want to know where I am in relation to the exit. Okay. So that's how I think about investing. It's great to know what average rates of return are in the portfolio. That's great to know, but I don't know how I should be investing in relation to what the average rate of the stock market or bond market or crypto or all the different types, or real estate, or there's so many different types of investing there. So once you know your phase of investing and the purpose of investing, then it becomes easier to determine what your asset allocation should be. So what is asset allocation? Well, simply, and this is from Investopedia, an asset allocation is an investment strategy that aims to balance risk and reward by apportioning the portfolio's assets according to an investor's goals. So it makes sense. If I take more risk on something, I would hope to expect or maybe balance out that risk with some more reward. And so we want to balance risk and reward on one side of the ledger with your goals, right? And what I see very often is people are taking maybe too much risk or not enough risk to accomplish their goal because they don't have a clearly defined goal. So again, we start with the phase, then we go to the purpose, which is what is the goal, and then we talk about asset allocation. So again, what is asset allocation? Asset allocation is simply the percentage of your allocation that is geared towards stocks or equities versus the percentage of asset allocation that is geared towards bonds or fixed income. So if someone came to me and said, hey, David, I'm in an 80-20 portfolio, I logged into my 401k and it said I'm in an 80-20 portfolio. What they're telling me is that 80% of their portfolio is in stocks or equities, and then 20% of their portfolio is in bonds or fixed income. So now, is that appropriate? I don't know. I don't know that person. I don't know their goals, but I do know their asset allocation. So a piece of homework for you, everybody that's on this workshop for today, log into your 401k, log into your IRA, and understand what is your current asset allocation. Understand what is your current asset allocation. For some of you that maybe have been kind of, not sitting in the driver's seat with your investments, you might be in what's called a target date fund. And it's commonly referred to as a target date fund or a freedom fund or a glide path fund. There's several names out there, but at its core, it's called a target date fund. And what a target date fund is essentially you're saying, I'm going to retire at a certain target date. Maybe it's 2060. Okay. So then the year 2060 becomes your target date. And if I'm 20 now, then from 20 to 2065, if that's when your year is that you're going to retire, I'm going to start off with a larger percentage of equities or stocks. And then as I get closer to that target date, my equity allocation is going to come down, and then my bond or fixed income allocation is going to go up. So then by the time you actually hit your target date retirement date, let's say it's 2060 or 2065 or whenever that is, then you'll be in a more conservative asset allocation. This is commonly referred to as like a set it and forget it type fund, but these are for people that are not savvy or don't want to learn about investing. A target date fund might be the best option because it will get more and more conservative over time. Whether or not that's appropriate for you, I don't know, but at least you'll have a higher asset allocation towards equity. So again, this is more of a set it and forget it type of fund, which again, it's not bad, but that's at its core what an asset allocation model is. It will get more conservative over time. Okay, now let's talk about asset location. Asset location is different than asset allocation. Asset allocation is how much of my portfolio is in stocks or bonds. Asset location is how much of my portfolio is taxable or tax deferred or income tax free. Okay, so let me ask you a question here. There's three different tax buckets that we think about at our firm. The first one is taxable account. So this is money that I'm earning from my job, right? That's taxable income, or a taxable brokerage account. So let's just say you go to Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard or wherever you go, wherever you have a brokerage account, and you open up just a standard brokerage account. You can invest money in that brokerage account. The second one is a tax deferred account. These would be things like a 401k or an IRA or a 457 or a 403b. This is a tax deferred, meaning you got a tax deduction when you contributed to it, and then you're going to defer those taxes until you get to retirement. Okay. The third bucket, this is income tax free but subject to estate taxes. This is all of the money that I'm saving in retirement will be tax free. So the growth, the earnings, and the distributions will all come back out to me tax free. These would be things like a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA or an HSA. Now let me ask you a question. Where do you think the majority of people save for retirement? Which bucket do you think the majority of people save for retirement in? Is it tax bucket number 1, tax bucket number 2, or tax bucket number 3? Which bucket do you think most people save for retirement in? All right, yeah, Peanut Butter Toast said number 2. So that would be tax deferred. Let's see, Manuel said number 3. So maybe Roth accounts. Daryl said 2. Yeah, Jim said 2. Yeah, so a lot of people are saying 2. I see a couple of 3s there. But yeah, by and large, what I see is that most people are saving funds for retirement in a tax deferred account, a 401k or an IRA or a 457 or a 403b. Okay, now let me ask you a question. In retirement, where would you rather be pulling money out of in retirement. So if you said, hey, David, I get to choose. If you could have chosen any one of these accounts to pull money from in retirement, which tax bucket would you have pulled from in retirement? Tax bucket number 1, tax bucket number 2, or tax bucket number 3, the income tax free and estate taxable here. So which bucket would you rather pull from in retirement? Yeah, a lot of people saying 3, and of course you're getting you're seeing the incongruity here, because people are saying, well, most people put money in the tax deferred because they want to get the tax deduction, but then when in retirement people want income tax free money. So you see there's a disconnect between what people are saying they want and what people actually do. And that's what I experience. A lot of people are putting funds into that tax deferred bucket, but then in retirement they're trying to do everything they can to put money into the tax free bucket, either through a Roth conversion or a Roth contribution. So let's talk through the tax implications for retirement savings. Okay, I like this chart, and Jonathan, if you can make it bigger, I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much. So I like this chart because it tells you what the plus sign means, preferential tax treatment. So this is tax treatment that is more preferential versus something else. Okay, and then the minus sign, this is a subject to taxes. Okay, so the only one that is a triple tax advantaged account is the HSA. Okay, so if you look at the bottom, it says health savings account. The HSA is the only account that's triple tax advantage as long as you use it for the intended purpose, which is for qualified medical expenses. So the contributions for an HSA are preferential tax treatment. The investment growth is preferential tax treatment, and the withdrawals also have preferential tax treatment. That's the only account that you're going to get that triple tax advantage there. So let's go back up to the top. The pre-tax 401k, of course, that's what most people put their money in, 401k. The contributions, you get a tax deduction, so that's preferential. The growth is also preferential because it grows tax deferred. And now here's where it's different. It's the withdrawal, when you take money out of your 401k or IRA, it gets taxed as ordinary income, okay? The second line here, Roth 401k and Roth IRA money. Now, here's where you get the negative sign up front, okay? So you get tax on the contribution. So if you put $100, if you get $100 from your employer and then you turn around and put that into a Roth IRA, you're not actually putting $100 in. If let's just say you're at a 20% marginal bracket and you pay 20% on that, you're only going to be putting $80 into that, Roth 401k or Roth IRA. But here's the difference: the growth in that Roth account and the withdrawals, as long as they're qualified, come out to you tax free. So that's where it's really preferential from a growth and withdrawal perspective. Okay. Now, after-tax contributions, this is a little bit of a sticky one because, right, this is an after-tax contribution that you make initially, and most people do this because they're trying to do like a mega backdoor Roth IRA. But regardless, there's not as much preferential tax treatment on the contribution. There is preferential tax treatment on the growth, but there's not, depending on how it gets taxed, there's some pluses and minuses there. So if I could, I would get at least 2 out of the 3 here, which would be the pre-tax 401k or the traditional Roth IRA, or the Roth 401k and Roth IRA, those top 2 lines. So again, hopefully that makes sense, but this is tax implications for retirement savings. This is where you're putting money into, over the long term. Now, I get this question all the time. Okay, David, I understand the asset location and how things get taxed on the contribution or on the growth or on the withdrawal. But what's the priority? Where do I start investing, right? So do I start with my HSA and then jump to my 401k, or do I start with my taxable brokerage account? And I like this slide from JP Morgan. They talk through from a long-term savings perspective, right? Start with the emergency savings. So I want to start with my 3 to 6 months of expenses, my rainy day fund, okay? Or if I get laid off, I have that emergency reserve. So I start there. Then I get the employer match. Now, it's going to be a little bit nuanced here because some employers will match your 401k and they'll match your HSA. So depending on what they match, right, get as much of the match as you possibly can in that either 401k or HSA. Then after number 2, jumping to number 3, then pay down high interest loans. So again, for me, I don't like high interest loans because credit card debt is kind of it's like a drag on your aircraft. If you're taking off from a plane, you have a lot of wind pushing you the other direction. You have a lot of drag on the aircraft, and so I don't like that because it's going to slow you down. It's going to inhibit launch there. So when people say, well, what's high interest? Well, according to JP Morgan here, they say such as credit card debt, student loans. So credit card debt or student loans with interest over 7.5 or 7.25%. So after number 3, then they jump to maximizing the contributions on the HSA, and then going back to the 401k and adding more money to your defined contribution savings plan, which is either a 401k or a 457 or something else. Then go back and pay down lower interest loans. So after you max out your 401k, then go back and pay off other lower interest loans like a home and auto, or maybe a personal loan if you have one. Then going to the IRA, and then going to a taxable account. Now, this is traditionally for people that are retiring at 65. There's a whole nother way I think that most people should invest if they're going to retire before 65, which I talk about in another workshop called Playing with Fire, Financial Independence, Retire Early. But for the majority of Americans that are retiring at 65, this is at least a good roadmap to figure out where you are, and then what is that next step that you need to take. I'm going to pause just to see if there's any questions here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. I know I'm going through a lot of information very quickly, so if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box as we go through the presentation. So now we've talked about sources of basically ways to get money into these retirement accounts. We talked about the order to get them in, and again, all we're talking about right now is asset location. So it's just about where the money is going. So again, I want to reiterate this and really drive this home as we think through the different account types. HSA is this top green one. The blue one is Roth 401k or a Roth IRA or IRA. And then taxable accounts, that's the just traditional brokerage account. And then the bottom green, which is likely where most people have the majority of their money, that would be sitting in like a pre-tax 401k or a traditional IRA. So investment earnings and withdrawals, those get taxed differently. But the one thing, and especially if you are on this workshop, I see a lot of people that are in the preservation and maybe shifting into the distribution phase. The one thing, and this is for you, the one thing you would maybe want to focus on is this far right checkbox, okay? It says included when calculating whether Social Security percentages gets taxed and Medicare surcharges. A lot of people don't realize that as your income goes up in retirement, the percentage of Social Security that you get more of that percentage can get taxed. And then also Medicare surcharges. So for Medicare Part B and for Medicare Part D, those amounts of premiums can go up based on your income. And so the sources of retirement funding matter a lot when you're thinking about other sources of income and the taxation of those accounts, okay? So don't necessarily assume, well, I'll for sure be in a lower tax bracket in retirement, as if that's the only thing you have to look out for. Not only are you looking out for federal income tax brackets, but you're also looking at the percentage of your Social Security that's going to get taxed and the Medicare surcharge that you will pay. So again, it's not just a one size fits all there. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, if there's questions, drop them in the chat box. So again, now we talked about 401k accounts. I think most people have access to, or I should say a lot of people have access to a 401k. Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, just type in the chat box if you have access to a 401k. You don't have to say if you're contributing or how much or anything. How much? If you have access to a 401k, just type in 401k in the chat box, in the chat. So what is a 401k? Well, 401k is essentially an employer-sponsored plan. And most of them, I think all of them now, mostly provide you the opportunity to make pre-tax contributions, after-tax contributions, and Roth contributions. I'm not going to go into the differences between them, but understand that most 401k plans offer you 3 ways actually to contribute to a 401k. Most of them also offer a match inside of the 401k, and understand that the maximum that you can put in to a 401k is $23,500 for before tax and Roth contributions. And then if you're age 50 or older, you can put in what's called a catch-up contribution into your 401k. And at least for 2025, that's $7,500. So the big question I get is, should I contribute to the traditional 401k or the Roth 401k? And of course, the answer is it depends. It depends on how you're going. What is your effective tax bracket right now, and then what is your tax bracket in the future? What will that look like? Now, again, it might be hard for you to imagine what's my tax bracket going to be in 30 years. We don't know. But one way to excuse me, one way to look at it is in reverse. So it's thinking right now, if I'm 20 years old and I just started my first job, I might be in the lowest income bracket that I will ever be in, for the next 30 or 40 years. And I'm also in the lowest tax bracket that I might ever be for the next 30 or 40 years. So from an income tax perspective, looking backwards, meaning looking from retirement, looking back at you today, and there's actually if you look at the IEEE USA salary report from I think I just looked at it from 2023. there's an upwards trend from age basically 20, I think it's like 25 to 45, where income is pretty linear. It goes at a pretty steady rate, meaning that your salary just continues to rise. But then at around age 50 to like 65, it kind of plateaus. So again, if I'm in my lowest income earning years, basically before 40 or 45, that might be the best time to make a Roth contribution because I'm in my lowest income years and maybe my lowest tax bracket years. So again, I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't do, but just understand the differences there in a 401k. Then, of course, there's IRAs. So IRAs, you can make a contribution either as a traditional IRA contribution or a Roth IRA. And those are actually two different types of accounts there. The contribution limits are $7,000 for 2025. And then there's additional catch-up contribution if you're 50 or older. There are some income limitations on the Roth IRA. So if you make too much money, you cannot contribute to the Roth IRA. So that's when you start thinking through, I need another door to get into the Roth, and that's where the backdoor Roth IRA and the mega backdoor Roth IRA come in to get more money into the Roth accounts. But certainly don't neglect the Roth 401k, especially if you have access to it. Not everybody does, so that might be a unique thing that you have access to at your employer. So how do we evaluate Roth accounts, right? From the charts, you might be thinking, well, David just loves Roth. Maybe we should just go all Roth here. And I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but I would say consider the benefits of evaluating a Roth at different life stages. So, and I like the way this chart kind of shows the differences here, right? So in my early working years, again, my income might be, and this is another way to basically explain what I was saying with the salaries, the IEEE USA Salary and Benefits Survey. Oh, thanks, John. It looks like Jonathan just put that in the report in the chat box. So feel free to review this for yourself. I just reviewed it a few days ago. So this, you'll see that the income, is pretty linear up until you hit around age 50. It kind of goes in line with this data here on your screen. So basically, if I'm basically 20 to 50-ish, my income is going to continue rising pretty linearly here. And so is it better to get into the Roth 401k or Roth IRA or either or both? But you're going to hit some inflection point where it doesn't necessarily make sense to go with the Roth IRA. So the way that it's explained here basically is what I'm trying to say is the exceptions here is if you have really peak years, right? Let's say you started out, you're working at Amazon, you're making $200,000 and you're 25 and you're single, so you have only one deduction. That might not be the time to make a contribution to a Roth 401k versus someone that's maybe starting out their first salary at at a local company and they're maybe making $100,000 or $115,000 and maybe they're married or married filing jointly, how they file. That might be more of a tax benefit there to contribute to that Roth account. So the exceptions here, for Roth contributions would be if you have really peak earning years, okay, and then the other time or the other window that I would consider, and the way that it's laid out here is if you were going to retire at 65. One thing you might consider is a Roth conversion between 65 and essentially your RMD age. And so that's why I like this chart here. It kind of gives you a general rule of thumb, which is to contribute to a Roth earlier in your career if you expect, that upward wage momentum, and then shift to a traditional account as your income increases. So you have to kind of play both ends here when you're thinking about the Roth 401k versus the traditional 401k, or the Roth IRA versus the traditional IRA. Any questions on this one? I think I saw, or maybe I missed a question on 529s, I think. Yeah, Tunji said, how does children's saving fund, such as a 529 or a 529 plan affect investing? Yeah, so I would say this, from the hierarchy or the order of investing, I would really focus on what that chart was showing earlier. So getting the match, getting your emergency fund, focusing on getting as much free money as you can from your employer, either through the HSA or through the 401k, and then I would start looking at saving for goals. So for some people, that goal, like you, might be for 529 savings for retirement, for your kids' college fund. A 529 has pros and cons, and so you have to kind of just weigh what is the benefit to you. If you're the type of person that's like, hey, my kid is for sure going to college and this money will be used for that, and then that's a great plan because that money goes tax deferred, and there's preferential tax treatment with the 529 accounts. So it could be good for you for your child for that reason. So yeah, great question. And then certainly the third account that we haven't touched on yet, which is the HSA. The HSA has three unique features in that you can save money in your HSA, you can invest money in your HSA, and you can spend money in your HSA. And I'll explain the differences here in a second. But if you have an HSA and you're on this workshop today, just type in HSA in the chat box. I'd be curious to see who has an HSA here on the webinar. So the unique features here, the first one, save. I think everybody understands the purpose. And let me back up. In order to enroll in an HSA, you have to be enrolled in a high deductible health plan. So if you're enrolled in a high deductible health plan, right, and your employer offers you this HSA account, you can certainly save money. You can contribute regularly to your HSA. Then you can spend money from your HSA, right? So this makes sense. You save money for what? You save it to spend it on a qualified medical expense. The difference here is in that there's an investing feature to HSAs, in that you can put money into your HSA, and then any excess money that maybe you're not going to use in the next 2 to 3 years, you can actually invest that money in the stock market. So if you're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years old and you're thinking, I'm in pretty good health, I don't necessarily need to use this money in the HSA, I could essentially push this off and let it save and invest over time, over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and then use this money from the HSA as a tax-free withdrawal in retirement for medical expenses. The one caveat I'll say is, the huge benefit here is, after age 65, the HSA, there's no penalty to take money out of an HSA for, even if it's not for a qualified medical expense. You just pay the taxes on it. So let's say you're 66 years old and you've got $500,000 in an HSA, just as an example, and you're like, hey, I want to go out and buy a new car with some of my HSA money. After age 65, you can take money out of your HSA. You won't get penalized, but you will get taxed on that money if it's not for a qualified medical withdrawal. Of course, the health savings accounts have limits. So there's contribution limits for individuals, for families, and there is a catch-up contribution. Now, this catch-up contribution is at a different age than the 401k and IRA contribution. I don't know why, but this is only for if you're over age 55, can you contribute to the HSA. So again, these are the contribution limits for 2025. They vary just a little bit every single year. And then there's huge benefits here from the HSA. As I mentioned, it has preferential tax treatment 3 times. So it's always tax-free, the contributions, the gains, and the qualified expenses, right? As long as they're qualified medical withdrawals. The other benefit is this is not a use it or lose it fund. They do not expire. So the funds do not expire like an FSA, right? This is like a 401k. You can roll it over to another plan. You can invest it, right? So the funds never expire. And certainly you can pay for medical expenses, which is what the intention of the HSA is for you and your family. Okay, so now we've talked about the phase of investing, the purpose of investing, asset allocation. We talked about location. We just spent a lot of time on that. Now let's talk about asset relocation. So maybe you're thinking, David, how do I move money between the buckets, right? I've got all my money in one account. How do I move it? Well, certainly you can make a contribution to a tax-deferred account. So this is like you taking money from your earned income, your taxable income, and you're putting it into an IRA or a 401k. You could also do a contribution to a Roth account, like a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA, or tax bucket number 3 is HSA, right? So that you could do an HSA there as well. Then you can do something that's called a Roth conversion. So this is where you take money that you have not paid taxes on and you convert it into an account where you pay the taxes in the current year, but then in retirement, that money comes back out to you tax-free. And so there is a little bit of a pain. There's a little bit of a big tax pill to swallow there from a tax perspective. You have to pay that tax on the conversion amount, and it counts as ordinary income. But then in retirement, that money comes back out to you tax-free. So there is a way to relocate money from a tax-deferred account to a tax-free account. Now, again, I'm going to putting this slide back up on your screen. When would be a good time to consider a Roth conversion? Again, the second phase here of life, when you're thinking about, hey, I just retired, or I just had a drop in income, right? So if you were to retire at 65 and your income dropped because you're not working at your job anymore, all of a sudden you have these windows of lower income. That might be the opportunity to, quote unquote, fill up the income bucket with a Roth conversion. So that might be an opportune time to consider a Roth conversion. A lot of times when we do this with our clients, we typically will do these in lower income years or when income drops. So that might be due to a market volatility dropping or their income dropping. So for whatever reason, maybe there's two people and one of them stops working or one of them retires. And so there's a lower income there, but they still have married filing jointly status. So that might be an opportunity to consider a Roth conversion. Or you simply just stop working and then you're in retirement, but maybe there's a delay between then and Social Security or then and RMD age. And so we use that bucket to fill up with a Roth conversion. So hopefully that didn't confuse you, but I just reiterate, there are ways to relocate money out of a tax deferred account into a tax-free account. Now let's talk about the types of investment products. So we talked about, what phase of investing you're in. Hopefully everybody knows what phase of investing they're in. Hopefully everybody knows the purpose. Why are they investing? For retirement, for a vehicle, for college, for just saving for a rainy day. Then they understand, hopefully you understand that your asset allocation. So what is the percentage of my portfolio that is geared towards, invested towards stocks or equities? And then what is the percentage of my asset allocation that is shifted towards bonds or fixed income? Then that now you know where you're saving or investing. So I'm in an 80-20 portfolio in this type of account, a Roth IRA or a 401k or a 457 or a 403b or a taxable brokerage account. So you know the location. You might consider if relocation is an opportunity you want to take advantage of. Now let's talk about what you're actually invested in, right? What are you actually going to invest in? So the types of investment products. Well, I always say there's no such thing as a good or bad product, only a good or bad fit. And so when I think about the different types of asset classes out there, what I want to think about is what's protected and what is not principal protected. So when you think of bank products, right, that's protected by typically FDIC insurance, right? So you think about checking account, savings account, CDs, those have FDIC insurance. And then even from some annuities and life insurance, there is some protection there from the insurance company. And then there's things that are not protected, like stocks and bonds, right? The market can go up, the market can go down. There's variable products like variable life insurance or variable annuities. Those can go up and go down. And so you have to be mindful anytime you get into a product, you have to understand the risks and also understand if that product is principal protected or is it not principal protected. Again, I wouldn't say there's anything as such as a good or bad product, only a good or bad fit. And it's hard to know, right? Some people will ask me, hey, David, should I consider gold in my portfolio? And it's like, I don't know anything. Some people ask me on webinars, like, I don't know anything about you, so I don't know if that's good or bad. It might be good or bad for you, but I don't know. You have to determine what's right for you. So be very careful when you're considering investing. Do you understand the risks and the time allotment that you have to invest for being in any one of these types of products? So from an investment perspective, so you understand kind of what the types of products are out there. From an investment perspective, many times people will use, and in financial advisors or individual investors will use what's called a risk tolerance questionnaire or risk tolerance score. And what this actually means here is essentially just how aggressive or conservative do I want to be in my investments? Okay, so I know there's stocks, I know there's bonds out there, but how do I actually put that into a portfolio that I can invest in? Okay, so if someone said I was in an aggressive allocation, this is just a sample. This is just from Schwab's website. This is just an example. So again, not saying you should go out and do this, but this is just an example that they have on their website. You can go out and look it up. But this would be an aggressive allocation. And then this portfolio, it says like 50% large cap equity, 20% small cap equity, 25% international equity, and then 5% some cash investments or fixed income there. And as you can see, this person who's in an aggressive allocation, I would say probably they're in the accumulation phase of investing. And if they weren't, I would maybe be a little bit surprised. Now, as we shift kind of further away from the aggressiveness, meaning all stocks or all equities, and more into fixed income, that's when we start, opening more doors to people to say, hey, you know what, you maybe are in the preservation phase of investing or of retirement. Maybe we should shift your allocation out to maybe not be as risky in your investments. And when we think about right, what the asset allocation and the diversification of our portfolio should be, we want to think through what is the goal of investing. Okay, so when I think about this and how this translates is sometimes people will schedule a call with me and they'll say, hey David, I've got whatever $50,000 and I want to invest this money. My first question is, what is the purpose of this money? Is this to buy a home next year? Is this to save for your kids' college that you just had a baby and you're gonna save for the next 18 years? Is this for retirement, right? So you have to think about what is the goal. And if it's a short-term goal, right, typically 1 to 3 years, or maybe probably 1 to 5 years, I would say it may not be the best opportunity to invest it, because what if the stock market drops and in 2 years you wanted to buy that house, but you can't because the stock market dropped and you invested that money. So I would, for short-term goals, I like, cash and cash equivalents. For medium-term goals, that's where you have kind of a conservative allocation. Maybe some equities, but mostly bonds or fixed income. And then for long-term goals, that's when we see the equity exposure continue to rise. So you want to align your investment strategy by your goal. That can help you take advantage of different levels of risk based on what you're trying to accomplish there. And then when we think of risk, right, what is the risk that I'm taking here, and what is the return that I'm getting here? And so now this is, and let me just reiterate, past performance is no indication of future returns. So I just want to put that out there. But historically, this is from Vanguard. So they look back basically since 1926, and they look at different asset classes. And they said, if you were on the far right here and you were 100% stocks and 0% bonds, this person would have received, basically roughly 10% in average annualized return. But if you look at the swings, the highest single year return and the lowest single year return, those are pretty far off from that 10%. And now, as you can see, the further away you move from stocks, so the further you move away from the right here, you move closer towards the left, you can see that your bond exposure is going up, and so your risk exposure is going down, and also your volatility is going down, which makes sense. I'm taking on less risk, I'm experiencing less volatility, I'm experiencing less return. So those three things go hand in hand. So again, it's not necessarily I'm not saying everybody should be in a certain asset allocation or a certain bond to stock exposure. You have to understand what is your goals for retirement. Again, approach investing from a goals-based perspective. And then certainly we can't talk about investing without talking about diversification. So let me ask you a question. In 2018, what was the highest performing asset class? Okay, in 2018, can anybody answer this? In 2018, what was the highest performing asset class? What performed the best in 2018 according to this chart? Any guesses out there? In 2018, what was the highest performing asset class? Cash. Exactly, Rich. Exactly. In 2018, the highest performing asset class was cash. Okay. Now I'll answer this second question. In 2019, what was the lowest performing asset class? Coincidentally, also cash. Okay. This is from BlackRock, but I like this chart because it shows how you can't necessarily say, oh, because last year this asset class performed better, I'm going to invest in it this year, right? That's the wrong way to. You're looking backwards, right? I think I can't remember. There's a famous hockey player that said you want to. I think it's like skate to where the puck is going to be. Maybe Wayne Gretzky or something. Somebody said that. But that's how we think about investing, right? We don't want to look in the past and say, oh, well, last year that did well, so we want to invest this year. You have to think about it from a strategic perspective and a forward-looking perspective. So let's finish this out with some common mistakes to avoid, and then we'll open up for questions here. So some common mistakes to avoid. The first one is trying to time the market, right? Trying to time the market is, I would say, just probably the worst mistake you can make, because if anybody could figure it out, we would know, because they'd be, maybe a millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire. I don't know, but I think trying to time the market is a big mistake, right? We don't know what asset class is going to outperform or underperform in the given year. Second mistake is comparing your returns to other people. So you cannot say, oh, well, my portfolio is doing X%, or but my neighbor's portfolio is doing Y%. I should go do what all they're doing, because you don't know what risk they're taking. You don't know what returns they're getting based on the risk that they're taking. That's what I'm getting at. The third one is neglecting your goals and your time horizon, right? So some people might say, well, I should invest like my neighbor is investing because they're getting X percentage and that's what I want. But their goals might be completely different than what your goals are. And their time horizon for investing might be completely different than what yours are. So you want to be mindful to not invest based on what other people are doing, trying to time the market, or even neglecting your own goals and your time horizon. And I like this slide from JP Morgan. They basically showed the returns of the S&P 500. So this is, again, past performance is no indication of future return. But I want to show you this slide because it's a good indication of what the impact of being out of the market. So this is basically someone that invested $10,000 between January 3rd, 2005 and December 31st, 2024. they got, I guess here an average 10%, basically roughly 10.4%. They were just invested for the full amount of time there. Okay. The second, so that was, I think that's almost, is that 20 years? Yeah, roughly 20 years. The second bar here is, this is if someone invested that same amount, but they got out. They got out at the wrong time, and then they missed the best 10 days of that market. They would have only gotten a 6% return. And then the third one here, somebody got out, but they missed the 20 best days. And as you can see, the trend just continues to go down. So that's why I'm stressing here. Do not try to time the market. I've heard someone say time in the market is more important than timing the market. So trying to, and this is common, I think, I'm doing another workshop here in a couple of weeks called The Psychology of Investing. This is pretty common. The people want to feel like they want to take control. Like, well, I can't control what the market's doing, so I'm just going to take control and pull my money out. So people take control, quote unquote, by selling out of the market after the worst days. That's likely to result in missing the best days, because you're going to see here on your slide, you can see it's the 6 of the 7 best days occurred after the worst days. So, and that's something we experience even in the last month. And so definitely don't try to time the market here. And what you should be doing is really investing based on your goals. So don't try to time the market, and based on what your goals actually are. A fourth mistake here, ignoring taxes. We talked a lot about asset location, asset relocation, and asset allocation. You cannot neglect taxes when you think about investing. So don't neglect taxes. And then finally, the fifth mistake here is just simply not developing a plan. People do not have a comprehensive plan. They don't know why they're investing. They don't know what their goals are. They don't know what their time horizon is. They're trying to time things based on what other people are doing. That's the simplest and biggest mistake I see people making, is simply not developing a comprehensive plan. So with that, I just want to recap it here. We talked about the 3 phases of investing, the purpose of investing, asset allocation, location, relocation, the types of investment products, understanding your risk tolerance score, and then common mistakes to avoid. And so I know there was a lot out there, but I want to open it up for questions. I know we have just a couple minutes left here before we close it out. And then certainly, if you are in that preservation or distribution phase of investing, I want to invite you to a 3-hour, if you enjoyed this workshop, we're going to do a 3-hour workshop. I think it's next week, actually. It's called Countdown to Retirement, T-10 to launch. So it's the 10 years before you retire, what you really need to know to plan for that. So it's just countdowntoretirement.com. I think it's rolling up on the bottom of your screen. You can visit countdowntoretirement.com. It's the number 2, so countdowntoretirement.com.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, David. So, folks, I know we are approaching the end of the hour. We'll probably take a few minutes, the final few minutes, just to take some few questions. David will go start with this first question from our audience member. I think it's our audience member, Roger. Is it correct that a Roth conversion from an IRA does not count towards an RMD?
That is correct. So you cannot take money from an RMD. So if you're, like, say you're 75 and you're taking money out of your IRA, you cannot take an IRA out of that. You can't take the RMD and then convert it for a Roth conversion. So that's correct.
Fantastic. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Our audience member Elijah just asked, will this webinar be saved so I can go back and take notes? Elijah, and for the rest of our audience, yes. So this webinar will be saved on IEEE USA's channels, and you'll be able to access them through the same links that you used to access them today. And appreciate you all tuning in. So, David, just to close things off, just a final question, final couple questions of my own. Excuse me. What tools and resources are available to help investors make these informed decisions?
Yeah, I think obviously coming to webinars like these, this is fantastic. This is a good baseline to figure out, kind of like I said, if you're in the hotel and in the back of the door, on the back of the door it says, here's your map to get out in case there's a fire, right? You need to figure out where you are on the map. That's kind of the first place. And coming to webinars like this is kind of that first place to figure out where am I. Once you get beyond that, then I would maybe even consider looking to your own 401k or IRA provider. A lot of companies like Empower, Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, Chase, right? They offer resources in there, and sometimes they're even tailored to you because it's showing you what you're invested in, and it will ask you, is this what you want to actually be invested in? So I would first turn to maybe whatever organization you're already a part of as a way to see, hey, are there any resources in my current organization to help me make better and informed decisions?
For sure, thank you.
Yeah.
And so our audience member, actually, Sean, just asked thoughts on consolidation of multiple 401ks.
Huge fan of consolidating old 401ks. I call them zombie 401ks because I just see this happen all the time, Sean, where people will, they'll schedule a call with me and I'll ask them like, hey, what are your talking about your old accounts? And they'll have like 3, 4, 5 old 401ks. And I'll say, well, what's the asset allocation? That just seems like a simple question. What's the asset allocation of these? And they'll say, I don't know. I haven't opened this account in 10 years. And it's like, okay, well, and I'm of the mindset that if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get managed. And so some people are just not looking at their old accounts. And so, yes, as much as you can, I would try to consolidate those 401ks, just because you want to manage it. You want to be a good steward of those resources.
Thanks for the great question, Sean. So, David, as we wrap things up, just my final question. What advice would you give to someone just starting their investment journey?
So one of my favorite books is called The Millionaire Next Door. It's actually literally sitting right here. It's called The Millionaire Next Door. If anybody was just getting started on their investing journey, I would encourage you to read The Millionaire Next Door. It's an older book, but it really walks through people, and it calls out certain people like teachers, engineers, lawyers, attorneys, things like that. It calls out certain people and walks people through their own journey to saving for retirement, and really the habits that make The Millionaire Next Door. So that's if I could just say one thing, I would definitely read The Millionaire Next Door.
We'll definitely look into that. Thank you. All right, everyone. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I know we could go on and on about this. This is a very huge topic. David, thank you so much for joining us today and providing your expert insights into how, when, and where to properly invest our resources. Always great to have you with us.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in and for your great questions as well.
A few quick announcements before we end things off today. First, IEEE USA is now receiving nominations for the 2025 IEEE USA Awards. Every year, the IEEE USA Awards are given to recognize professionalism, technical achievement, and literary contributions to public awareness and understanding of the engineering professions in the United States. You can find details on each award, eligibility, and the nomination process on our website. The link has been provided in the comment section.
Next up, we're just a little over a week until our IEEE USA Innovation, Workforce, and Research Conference, or iWork, on May 15th in Portland, Maine.
This full-day summit will provide a platform for meeting potential partners in industry, academia, and government, exploring federal technology initiatives and learning about government small business programs that foster innovation in the Northeast, and is an event you don't want to miss. Finally, cabins are filling up quickly for IEEE USA's cruise to the Western Caribbean this fall, with most of the suite level cabins almost sold out. For those who have joined us on our previous 2 cruises, you already know the incredible experiences and connections this event offers. For first timers, this is your chance to create unforgettable memories, enjoy great company, and embark on a journey packed with excitement. Don't miss out. Secure your cabin today and join us for an adventure you won't forget. If you enjoyed the content presented in today's webinar, be sure to check out our extensive catalog of other presentations and publications available on demand on our website for your viewing pleasure. If you haven't yet, please be sure to like and subscribe to our social media channels. And don't forget to check back daily for updates on upcoming events. Have a great day, everyone.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ashanti Maxwell. I'm an associate professor in electrical engineering at the University of Southern Maine. I'm very excited to welcome all of you for the IEEE USA Innovation, Workforce, Research and Development Conference, which will be held on May 15th at the University of Southern Maine Portland campus. If you are a STEM entrepreneur or if you are somebody who wants to start your business in Maine, this will be your conference. Our goal is to bring resources and representatives from the industry, academia, as well as from the government into one place So if you are a change maker in Maine or would like to be one, this is your opportunity. And I'll see you on May 15th.